The decade after the First Illyrian War witnessed a revival of Illyrian power under Demetrius, who succeeded Teuta. Around 222 BC, Demetrius became the official regent of the Illyrian Kingdom by marrying Teuta, Agrant's first wife, and the mother of the young king, Pins. The marriage also gave the Illyrian Kingdom a competent regency for the first time since 229 BC. It is at this point we must take a moment to look back at Demetrius' role under Agrant's and Teuta's reign. Demetrius was described as an Illyrian who was born on the island of Pharos, in the Adriatic Sea off the coast of Dalmatia. Under the Illyrian king, Agrant, he ruled Pharos, from his stronghold overlooking a sheltered harbour. After Agrant's death in 230 BC, Demetrius continued as ruler of Pharos, under the regency of Queen Teuta. Under her reign, Demetrius became a key figure, and an important general for the continuing expansion of the Illyrian power across the region. Teuta systematically attacked Issa, the polis of Corcyra, and Epidamnos, in a quick succession. During the siege of Corcyra, the local garrison in the utmost distress and despondency sent together with the peoples of Apollonia and Epidamnos envoys to the Achaeans and Aetolians, imploring them to send aid to their struggle, and not allow them to be driven from their home by the Illyrians. The two leagues, after listening to the envoys, consented to their request, as both leagues began preparing to contribute on raising 10 decked galleys, along with many troops and supplies. In a few days, they were ready and sailed for Corcyra, in hopes of raising the siege. The Illyrians, now reinforced by 7 decked galleys sent by the Acarnanians, in compliance with the terms of their treaty, encountered the Achaean fleet off the island of Paxos. The Illyrians lashed their galleys in batches of 4, and thus engaged the enemy. They sacrificed their own galleys, presenting them broadside to their adversaries, in a position of favoring their charge. However, when the Achaean ships had charged and struck them, the Illyrians found themselves in a difficult situation. In each case, the 4 galleys lashed together were hanging on their beaks, while the Illyrians leapt on the decks of the Achaean galleys, and overtook them by their numbers. In this way they captured 4 galleys, and sunk with all hands a galley, on board of which was Margos of Chaeronea. Highly elated by their success, the Illyrians continued the siege of Corcyra with more security and confidence. The Corcyrians, whose hopes were crushed by the repulse of their allies, and after enduring the siege for a short time longer, came to terms with the Illyrians. The city was spared, and the garrison surrendered. As a result, Corcyra received a garrison under the command of Demetrius of Pharos. With the capture of Corcyra, the Illyrians secured a pivotal position that allowed them to intercept the entire trade on the sea routes between Greece, Italy, and Sicily. Such dominance in the Adriatic Sea made a response from the great powers inevitable. The Romans were already preparing their first intervention on the opposite coast of the Adriatic. Soon after these events, their fleet sailed in and took possession of Corcyra. This success was made possible not only through the cooperation of the Corcyrians themselves, but also through the treachery of the Illyrian governor Demetrius, who delivered his own garrison into Roman hands. After the Roman invasion and Teuta's resignation, Demetrius had a significant influence in the Illyrian Kingdom, after marrying Teuta and becoming the regent of the kingdom. The new Illyrian regent began to renew traditional Illyrian ties with Macedonia. In 222 BC, an Illyrian contingent of 1,600 men, under the personal command of Demetrius, fought with distinction at the Battle of Celacia, where the Macedonians won a conclusive victory over the Spartans. After Celacia, Demetrius began attempting to extend his control over Illyria, at the expense of Rome. In 220 BC, Demetrius and the Illyrian commander Serdalaidas sailed south of Lissus with 90 galleys. After an assault on Pylos had failed, in the western Peloponnese, they separated their forces, with Demetrius taking his chances in plundering the Cyclades, while Serdalaidas returned north. Upon arriving at Naupactus with 40 ships, Serdalaidas was encouraged by his brother-in-law, Aemenas, king of the Athamanes, to join the Aetolians in their planned invasion of Achaia. With help from Cynethan traitors, they attacked and burned Cynetha, a town in the north of Arcadia, located on the northern slope of the Araucanian Mountains. They also attacked Clyta, but had failed to capture it. Meanwhile, Demetrius continued on into the Aegean with 50 galleys. He sailed to the Cyclades, where he extorted tribute from some of the islands, and plundered the others. Chased by Rhodian warships, Demetrius decided to stay at Century, the Aegean port of Corinth. At the same time, the Macedonian commander in Corinth, Taurian, learned of Serdalada's and the Aetolian invasion. Taking his cue from the Aetolians, Taurian agreed to drag Demetrius' ships across the isthmus, to bring them into play in the Gulf of Corinth, in return for Demetrius' assistance against the Aetolians. Although Demetrius conducted a few raids on the Aetolian coast, he was too late to hinder the Aetolians' return from Achaia. While Rome was preoccupied with wars against the Gauls, Demetrius sailed south of Lissus, and engaged in piracy, in contravention of the settlement in 228 BC. Even more boldly, he began to launch raids into the territory of Roman allied tribes. It could be that Demetrius was testing the Romans, and due to the lack of any Roman response, he believed that they either could not, or did not wish to intervene. This was an illusion created to Demetrius, as the Romans were already occupied with the Roman-Gallic War. Further trying his luck, in the summer of 220 BC, Demetrius set out with 90 light galleys, along with Serdalada's, on a grand piracy expedition, ravaging and looting cities around the Adriatic Sea, in a blatant violation of their treaty, signed 8 years before. After returning to the Illyrian Kingdom after much plunder, Demetrius continued operations during the following winter, attacking and seizing Roman allied cities and communities in southern Illyria. The disproportionately massive Roman action, which began in 219, was probably motivated by the Republic's desire to swiftly and decisively conclude the Illyrian situation, once and for all. Unlike Teuta in 229 BC, Demetrius was well prepared for the Roman invasion. He first placed a garrison in Demalum, an Illyrian city fortress in Apollonia, and stationed 6,000 of his best forces on his home island of Pharos. Just like in the First Illyrian War, both Roman consuls led the Roman expedition, but the leading role was played by Aemilius Paulus. In 219 BC, the consul judged that Demalum was essential to Demetrius' authority in the region and thus resolved to bring the stronghold under his control. Within 7 days, however, the city was taken by direct assault, a swift victory that shattered Demetrius' authority. In the aftermath, the Illyrian towns and cities nearby submitted to Roman protection, each receiving terms suited to their situation. With the mainland secured, the Romans then advanced against Demetrius on the island of Pharos. The Roman consul arrived with the majority of his troops, but soon saw that the fortress was too strong for a direct assault, and that the port town was well stocked with men and supplies. Rather than settle into a long siege, he devised a strategy to draw Demetrius into the open. The Roman army crossed from the mainland, and concealed itself in a wooded part of the island. At dawn the next day, a squadron of Roman ships approached the harbour, provoking Demetrius to respond. Confident in his numbers and provisions, he marched out with his best troops to meet the landing. In doing so, he thinned the defences of his walls, unaware of the greater danger. From the opposite side of the island, Aemilius suddenly advanced with the main army, cutting Demetrius off from the safety of his city. The Illyrians were forced to turn and fight on open ground, hemmed in between the two Roman forces. Demetrius tried to rally his men, and for a time the Illyrian lines held firm. But the weight of superior Roman numbers and discipline pressed them back. Surrounded and with no refuge behind their fortifications, the Illyrian resistance collapsed. Demetrius' army was broken, and the survivors soon laid down their arms. Demetrius evaded his capture by placing a squadron of hidden galleys in a secret cove. On these ships he fled to the south, abandoning his family to Roman imprisonment, and his kingdom to an unknown fortune. Not long after, Demetrius reached the Adriatic port town of Actium, where the fleet of a great Hellenistic king, Philip V of Macedonia, was anchored. The Macedonian king welcomed Demetrius heartily, and he quickly became a key advisor to Philip. Meanwhile, the Romans destroyed the fortifications of Pharos, and before the summer was over, Aemilius withdrew all of his legions from the region. Leaving no military presence, they once again left only their friendship behind, but had demonstrated to the great Macedonian kingdom that they had the will to intervene whenever needed. Additionally, after learning of Demetrius' whereabouts, the Roman Republic called for the extradition of Demetrius, but Philip had refused. After the Second Illyrian War, Pins was again proclaimed king. Even though he was Agrant's son, and was a legitimate ruler of Ardean Kingdom, Pins was not favored among the Illyrians, possibly due to his young age. In 218 BC, Cerdileides took over his nephew's role and became king. Because of the Carthaginian threat in Spain, the Romans did not intervene. In 217 BC, Cerdileides ceased his support for Philip, possibly due to a promised subsidy was unpaid, and long overdue. He dispatched 15 galleys to collect and escort the payment, but at the island of Leucas south of Corcyra, his forces killed 2 of Philip's Corinthian allies, and seized their 4 galleys. Cerdileides' fleet then sailed south, and began to plunder around Cape Malea, in the southern Peloponnese. In response, Philip prepared a strong naval force of 50 war galleys, which headed south at full speed to deal with Cerdileides. This counterattack by Philip was too slow, and missed its targets. Cerdileides went on to march into Daceretia, taking several cities, and invading parts of western Macedonia. He looted Piceum in Pelagonia, and overran some frontier districts of Macedonia. Before the winter, Philip had occupied the area of Lyncestis, cutting off the direct route from Illyria, and extended his power to Daceretia. In the meantime, Philip was planning an invasion of Illyria. However, unbeknown to the Macedonian king, he would face not only the galleys of Cerdileides, but also the heavier warships of the Roman navy, as Cerdileides had entered into an alliance with Rome. Influenced by Demetrius, Philip's first target was the Illyrian coast. In 216 BC he had built a fleet of 100 light warships. He led his fleet around the Peloponnese into the Adriatic, gambling that Rome, deeply involved in the Hannibal crisis, would not intervene. When news arrived of Philip's invasion, Cerdileides quickly appealed for help. The Romans responded without delay, sending 10 heavy galleys from Sicily to support him. Their presence signaled that Rome was ready to involve itself directly in the struggle across the Adriatic. Upon learning of this, Philip fled back, and the invasion of Illyria was delayed for the moment. Realizing that the Roman heavy ships were now present on Illyrian waters, Philip spent 213 BC and 212 BC, making advances in Illyria by land. Keeping clear of the coast, he took the inland towns of Ottantania and Dimale, and subdued the tribe of the Daceretii, and the Illyrian Partini, and the southern part of the Ardean state. Cerdileides with his son Pleuratus III, Longarus of the Dardanian state, and Epirus, together with the Aetolian League, allied with each other, against Philip's Macedonia. At this point, Rome was able to spur the Aetolians into an alliance against Philip. For 2 years the allies warred with Macedonia, achieving minor military victories, and politically gaining more allies from among the Greek city-states. When the Romans retired from the field, possibly to fight Hannibal's forces, Philip advanced against the Aetolians, turning the fortunes of the war. In the end, the Macedonians largely regained their original position, and the Romans were ready to make peace. In the Treaty of Phoenix, they formally acknowledged the favorable position of Macedonia, including the capture of Illyria. With the conquest of Illyria, and parts of Dardania, the Macedonian state would enter its second peak, after Alexander's reign. However, this peak Macedonian state was to be short-lived, as following years later, the new Illyrian generation would challenge Philip on their struggle for independence. In our next episode on the Illyrian Wars, we will look at the rise of King Gentius and his son Pleuratus III, the build-up of the events of the Third Illyrian Wars, and the final destruction of the Illyrian Kingdom. To make sure you don't miss that, subscribe and press the bell button. Consider liking, sharing, as it helps tremendously. This is the Medieval Chronicles channel, and we will see you in the next one.